Well, I'm still a good bit in the basement today, but uh, bear with me. We're still in Psalm 1, but the good news is we're going to wrap it up today, I think. Um, and because it's not a very long psalm, let's. I'm going to read the entire psalm, and because I want to bear it in context, okay? Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They're like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. Um, I want to start as we reflect on this, the last verse of Psalm 1. Hebrew poetry conforms to, I wouldn't call them rules necessarily, but there are certain forms that they conform to. And when I was growing up and in school, most of the English poetry that we read also conformed to certain rules. There was meter and there was rhyme, as well as the artistic word pictures that were involved in. I mean, great poetry is not just rhyming couplets in a meter. Great poetry evokes emotion and thought through the use of these words that conformed to meter and rhyme. Modern poetry tends not to do that. It, I, like so many modern things, and I know I'm going to sound like an old guy now, but it's like so many modern things. There's no form, there's no conformity. It just boom, let's throw it out there and see what happens. And I will admit to you that some of the modern poetry that I've come across, and I'm not a big poetry fan, so it's not like I have this huge, deep background to draw from, but I will say some of this non-conforming poetry is evocative. It evokes feelings and thoughts, but not all of it. One of my I have a lot of pet peeves that are about modern worship music. Uh, as I use the term pet peeves, I probably have shared this before, but I'll share it again. One of the great privileges of my young ministry life that at the time I didn't realize the high honor it was that I got to be the primary chauffeur for J. Russell Morris while he was living in Tulsa. And he never learned how to drive, never got a driver's license because he spent more than 50 years in Asia, China, Tibet, Thailand, Burma. Uh, he, okay, his whole story is just, it's beyond amazing. And it included more than a year in a communist Chinese interrogation camp. Anyway, one of the things that Brother Morris loved to do was to go to the monthly preacher's lunch. All the independent Christian churches in Tulsa and the surrounding area, their ministers would meet for lunch once a month. We had this little loose officer setting where primarily it was the most important thing, probably the two most important jobs. The secretary that sent out postcards, because this was well before email, as reminders, and then also the president who would arrange for content for the meeting, an outside speaker or one of us. Anyway, one month we got to the lunch. My memory is it was Casa Bonita. You couldn't hardly beat a lunch at Casa Bonita. And however you felt, well, I mean, Casa Bonita no longer exists, but back in the day, well, anyway, we were at lunch, and the president stood up and said, I was unable to get a program arranged for today. I thought we'd just go around the room and share our pet peeves in the ministry. Well, I think all of us, almost all anyway, when we heard that, thought, oh, dude. Wait a minute, we didn't use dude back then. It was, oh my goodness. Have I got pet peeves, and would I be happy to share them? We all went around, and it was probably what you would expect from a bunch of preachers. And then we came to Brother Morris. Now, Brother Morris was shorter than I am, and he used Grecian formula on his hair, so it was either orange or needing to. You could tell, okay, it's time to go back to the bottle again. But he would stand up, and he always put his fingers together like this when he talked, and he always gave a fairly significant biographical sketch of his life and his ministry, which at the time I thought, well, I've heard this a bazillion times. Do you have to say it every time? Now, I wish I had heard it another dozen times so I could remember it in detail. But anyway, he stood up and he said, brothers, in my experience, I have many peeves, but I make it my practice never to pet them. And then it was like every guy in that room had been punched in the gut. Pet peeves? Don't pet them. So I'm going to try not to pet my peeve. I'll share that I have very strong preferences about music in general, and I don't think there's anybody that listens in this doesn't know me, but so if you know me, you know I got a lot of opinions and preferences, and some of them are frivolous. My peeves, my preferences about music are not just frivolous, in my opinion. I am a musician. I studied music. I know music. I know literature. And when I hear worship music, that's very trite and derivative. And the lyrics are very, in my opinion, trite. And although I'm not against repetitive phrasing, I kind of, after the 11th repetition, I'm thinking, okay, move on. Well, anyway, Now, I burned 3/4 of my time on my pet peeve. So here's why I was going there. Because Hebrew poetry conforms to form, and the form involves balance. You see it in Psalm 1, you see it in all of the Psalms, regardless of which one you look at. You see it in Ecclesiastes, and to a degree, Song of Songs, or Songs of Solomon. And here's what it amounts to. You have statement A that is either followed up with or elucidated on by statement B, or you have statement A and statement B is in opposition of statement A. But there is this, I hesitate to use the term yin and yang because it's Hebrews didn't, there was no yin and yang for a Hebrew, pardon me, but there was balance. So when you look at Psalm 1, you see the balance. You see the idea A, that the blessed person does not work with the wicked and the sinner and the mocker. Instead, idea B, they delight in the law of the Lord, and they meditate on it day and night. They are like a tree planted by streams of water, and so you get this. Okay, and then the psalmist goes on to talk about the judgment. So, I mean, verse 5 says they're not going to be able to stand in the judgment. And so verse 6, what we have is verse 6. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, idea A, but the oppositional thought, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. The Lord watches over the way of the righteous. Now, we got to think about what does that mean, and probably a fifth grader could get the idea that if someone is watching over, they're not just a spectator. They're not just seeing it happen. You know, when a parent watches over their child, even a babysitter watching over their charge means they are watching so that they can take care of. The Lord watches over the way of the righteous. That's a huge thought. God, and because I burn off so much time, I'm going to have to come back to this, but God is watching over us. He's not just a spectator out there. One of the aspects of deism as a theology is that God, the world and systems are like a clock that God wound up at the beginning and he threw out there and he just said, make the most of it. I still exist, but you're on your own. No, that's not what this indicates. Instead, that the Lord watches over the way of the righteous. We're going to come back to that next time. Surprise, surprise, on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.